And joining me now is Keith Lepor, who is running as a Republican for the 9th Congressional District. Keith, welcome to It's All Local.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you're a first-time candidate, so people at home unfamiliar with you, who is Keith in a nutshell? In a nutshell,
I am Keith Lepor, running for Congress in the 9th Congressional District, and I was born in Boston. I was actually a Jimmy kid. I had childhood cancer, which I was able to overcome. I moved back to Massachusetts to attend Boston University, graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees in political science and international relations. I went on to do my graduate work in Middle East studies in Cairo, Egypt, and onward after that to do my postgraduate work at Oxford University. And that's, you know, and I worked as a consultant for many years in international business development, and have an extensive background in international travel, international business, and consulting and political analysis.
Why are you running for Congress?
I'll tell you, the reason that I'm running is all of my life I have sat on the fence, and I've been very skeptical of politicians who I believed, for the most part, put politics above principle. And I always voted, but I wasn't a participant in the process. And I'm actually, by profession, a freelance photojournalist, and I specialize in guerrilla warfare and counterinsurgency. And most recently, I spent a year in Afghanistan working in support of U.S. and coalition forces. And what I found often when I was running with frontline combat units was the inconsistency of equipment. And it was that inconsistency that led me, that was the initial impetus to decide to run. But I was also very concerned about the direction of American national security policy and the state of our economy. And because the stakes, I thought, were far too high, I just didn't feel that I could continue to sit in the sidelines and complain, and decided that it was important to come back to the United States, take a year of my time. You know, essentially I'm doing this as a civic responsibility, and I'm living off of my savings, and I'm doing this on a full-time basis. And I am a full-time, candidate.
Mm-hmm. Steve Lynch is the current congressman for the district. He's got a challenger on the Democratic side. You've got another person running for the Republican ticket. What do you feel that Congressman Lynch is not carrying out what the people really want from him and what they want in a congressperson?
Well, quite frankly, Congressman Lynch's time has passed. I mean, the interesting thing that I've found throughout the 9th Congressional District is people perceive him to be a quote-unquote Republican in Democratic clothing. And yet if you actually look at it objectively and you look at the analysis, he actually votes lockstep 98% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. And the American Conservative Union have actually given him a rating of 4 out of 100. By comparison, Harry Reid, the Majority Leader of the Senate, receives an 8. So frankly, Harry Reid is twice as conservative as Stephen Lynch. Now, if you think that out of control spending and debt accumulation in Washington is not a problem, then by all means continue to support the incumbent. But if you are looking for fiscal responsibility, limited government, and get this economy jump-started, then it's time to make a change. And I think what's also important to take note of is that, Steve Lynch likes to act as though he's a homeboy, and he has everybody's, he's out for the common man. But if you look at the people that actually contribute to his campaign, 44% of his contributions are from PACs. And in 2007, 2008, the biggest contributor was Fannie Mae. Now, obviously, he was on the House Banking Committee with Barney Frank, and I would like to know, and I would challenge him, what was his role in the out-of-control nature and the problems that arose from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And it's interesting that he did receive $15,000 during 2007, 2008. And if you look at the contributors now, they're, the number 1 contributor is labor unions. The number 2 contributor, would be trial lawyers. And it's interesting that, it obviously goes back to the whole healthcare issue. But if you really want to limit the costs in healthcare, then I think it's important that we have tort reform. Now, Stephen Lynch, obviously, what's perplexing to people is that it was the right vote, but for all the wrong reasons. He was holding out for the public option and protecting his friend's Cadillac insurance plans. He tries to have it both ways, and you can't.
So how would you have voted on the health care bill?
I would have voted against it, and I think it's important that we focus, if we're going to focus on costs, let's focus on tort reform. Let's allow insurance companies to compete between state lines, and I mean that's going to drive down costs. But for me, I mean what I'm focused on are jobs in the economy. And I think that is the key issue in this election cycle. And it's unfortunate that we have these problems, but it's out of control spending in Washington and debt accumulation, which frankly is being financed by countries like the People's Republic of China, Japan, Saudi Arabia. And I think it's important. We don't have a revenue problem in Washington. We have a spending problem, and that's what I'm going to Washington to try to address. I intend to address. And I think it's also critical that my interests are the interests of the United States. That's why I decided to get into this. Now, unlike Stephen Lynch, I don't need this job. He is a professional politician, and I don't believe that he has much to show for the work he has done there since 2001. Now, I am a citizen politician. And for the people that say, oh, he has no right to run for such an esteemed office because he has no political experience, well, quite frankly, that for me is a badge of honor. And it's the right of any citizen to run. And the one thing we don't have a shortage of in Washington are professional politicians.
Well, it seems that's the way that people want it to go anyway. There's a lot of conversation out there about we need better people, we need change. And so for somebody like you who isn't a career politician to come in, could you be exactly what somebody's looking for?
I think I'm exactly what people are looking for. And I think what's really interesting, and I see myself now as a real underdog, in an ordinary election cycle here in Massachusetts, I realize that I would have no chance whatsoever going up against a union-backed incumbent. However, that being said, as a freelance photojournalist, as I mentioned, specializing in guerrilla warfare and counterinsurgency, I believe that I'm well qualified to take on such an individual. Now, I think that it is critical going forward that we look at the interests of not only the Commonwealth, but in the nation. And I think what we need to do is we need fiscal responsibility, we need limited government, we need to facilitate the growth of small and medium-sized businesses throughout the country as well as the Commonwealth. And quite frankly, they're responsible for generating 80% of the jobs in this country.
As a congressman, if you're elected, how would you work to spur economic growth and job creation?
If I'm elected, what I would like to do to help facilitate growth in this country is to do more to support and assist small and medium-sized businesses. And the way I would do that is by assessing and looking at the regulations that govern how they operate. I would also look to see if there's a way to simplify the tax code and to facilitate the growth of small and medium-sized businesses, which are critical because they are responsible for 80% of the jobs in this economy, job creation of this economy. And what I think is ironic is why is it that you take companies that are operating successfully and you increase the tax burden so that you can help support those companies that are not performing optimally. And I just think it's ridiculous and farcical, and that's what we're seeing in Washington.